The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus told his disciples a parable about the necessity for them to pray always without becoming weary. He said, "There was a judge in a certain town who neither feared God nor respected any human being. And a widow in that town used to come to him and say, 'Render a just decision for me against my adversary.' For a long time the judge was unwilling, but eventually he thought, 'While it is true that I neither fear God nor respect any human being, because this widow keeps bothering me, I shall deliver a just decision for her, lest she finally come and strike me.' The Lord said, 'Pay attention to what the dishonest judge says. Will not God then secure the rights of his chosen ones who call upon him day and night? Will he be slow to answer them? I tell you, he will see to it that justice is done for them speedily. But when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?'" The Gospel of the Lord. Just a couple months ago, Frank Caprio, often called America's nicest judge, passed away at the age of 88. Judge Caprio was the municipal court judge down in Providence, Rhode Island for over 40 years, and he became somewhat famous because of a television show about his courtroom that depicted him dealing with all sorts of minor crimes, from traffic violations to speeding tickets, disorderly conduct. And he became a YouTube channel. He racked up over 500 million views. So many people have seen this judge in action. People love him because he has a wonderful personality. He could actually be very tough, especially when he thought that you were not taking accountability for your actions or you were being rude to the judge. He would throw the book at you. But he could also be incredibly kind and compassionate, especially when he thought that you were trying to learn from your mistakes or you were just down on your luck. And there's all sorts of heartwarming stories of this judge helping a single mother who's just trying to make ends meet, or helping a veteran get back on his feet, helping a teenager who just made some mistake. He once said, he never kind of just gave people a pass, but he would often give them a break. And he once said this, "In my courtroom, I've seen people at their best and sometimes at their lowest. But no matter who stands before me, rich or poor, young or old, I try to see something more than just a case number. I try to see the person. We all stumble sometimes, but when we meet those stumbles with kindness instead of judgment, with compassion instead of criticism, we give people a second chance, not just in the court, but in life. I believe in the power of mercy, because when you show someone a little understanding, it can change their whole day, sometimes their whole life." Well, the attitude of this just and merciful judge from Rhode Island could not be further from the attitude of the judge that we hear about in the gospel today, who neither feared God nor respected any human being. This judge could not even give the poor widow the time of day. He couldn't even give her a court date, couldn't even hear her case, and that's all she was asking for. I'm sure this poor widow thought she was in the right, but all she's asking for is, "Render a just decision for me." But this judge cannot be bothered. Of course, in those days, to be a poor widow like that meant to not have many rights, not have much recourse. You were probably not able to make a living, and you were poor. And to be a poor in almost any time usually means to be forgotten, to be dismissed, to not be given a chance. And so this poor widow has to keep knocking at the door of the judge. He has to keep persevering and demanding that she get a hearing. And finally, the judge relents. Not because he's interested in the woman or because he's interested in her as a person or interested in justice, but because he's interested in himself. He doesn't want his day ruined and says, "Okay, I'm just going to give her a hearing lest she finally come and strike me." And, this judge just doesn't see what his job is, which is to deliver justice. Now, the point of Jesus' story is not that God is like that. We have to badger and hound God and keep demanding that he listen to us. No, the point of Jesus' story is the opposite, that God is not like that. God listens quickly to the cry of the poor. If anything, he's on the side of the poor more because they don't have much of a chance in this life. That he does speedily, he makes sure that justice is done speedily for those who cry out to him, Jesus says. And that's what God is like. He's the just judge. As St. Paul reminds Timothy in our other reading today, we all have an appointment with that just judge. And you can't get out of that court date because we all have to give an account before God, and we'll all be judged by how we treat other people. I'm sure that when Judge Caprio went to go meet that ultimate judge back in August, he received a great hearing, a beautiful encounter, because he had treated others mercifully, so I'm sure he was treated mercifully as well. In fact, thousands of people came to his funeral down at the cathedral in Providence, and thousands more watched from all over the world. He had made such an impression. In fact, even our former seminarian, Spencer, who went to school down in Providence, he had gotten to know Judge Caprio. He went to the funeral. Though it made me think, now, how come he knew Judge Caprio so well? I hope it wasn't because of an abundance of speeding tickets. Well, anyways, many people came to honor Judge Caprio, this just judge. And so much of what Judge Caprio believed in was really molded by his Catholic faith. He was a very devout Catholic. In fact, he said once, he said, "I have a deep and abiding faith in the Catholic Church, in Jesus, and in the power of prayer." So much of what the church teaches about justice, about solidarity, about rights and responsibilities, about the dignity of every human person, about the preferential option for the poor, all of this was behind what Judge Caprio believed in and practiced in his life. All of these principles are foundational to what is often called Catholic social teaching. Catholic social teaching is a body of teachings from popes and the church's magisterium. It's rooted very much in the scripture and the teachings of Jesus. But popes for the last 100 years plus have really said, we need to think through, what does it mean to be a disciple of Jesus in today's society, in a modern society, which looks very different sometimes than an ancient society. And it's difficult sometimes because we live in a world that is incredibly complex, that's increasingly interconnected, in which it's hard sometimes to figure out what am I called to do in justice towards other people? How do I live compassionately with other people? And we live in a time of such tremendous changes due to technology that it's very disorienting for many people. In fact, if you're over the age of 30, arguably you've lived through more changes in your lifetime than the rest of human history put together. But there are times of other change as well. In fact, Catholic social teaching began with a pope called Pope Leo XIII, who lived during the time of the Industrial Revolution, which was also a time of tremendous change. All of a sudden, people were no longer living in their villages with their families, maybe working in a trade guild like they had always done for centuries. All of a sudden, all these big mills and factories were opening up, and people were moving to the industrial cities in England, or places like Exeter, New Hampshire, where they opened up the mills. That's how our parish started in the 1840s. All the Irish workers, the Polish workers, the French workers coming to work in the mills. And Pope Leo XIII was very concerned for his flock. And at the time, many workers were exploited. They didn't have much rights. And so Pope Leo XIII wrote a beautiful teaching encyclical called Rerum Novarum, which means the new things. Hey, all these new things are happening. Let's think through, what does it mean for us as followers of Jesus? And he taught very beautifully. It rejected many of the false ideas that were going on at the time, false solutions like communism or unbridled capitalism. And he taught about the dignity of work. He talked about the rights of workers. He talked about the solidarity that should exist between rich and poor. Well, when Pope Leo XIV got elected earlier this year, our first American pope, he said to the cardinals who elected him, he said, I chose the name Leo. And I was very much thinking of Leo XIII, who lived during the time of tremendous change. Because I think we're living through a time of tremendous change as well that can really only be compared to the Industrial Revolution in terms of its social change. And he said, in our own day, the church offers to everyone the treasury of her social teaching in response to another industrial revolution and to the developments in the field of artificial intelligence that pose new challenges for the defense of human dignity, justice, and labor. Something like AI is an incredibly powerful tool that's already disrupting society in many ways, but it's just a tool. And tools are there to serve the good of humanity. Human beings are not meant to serve the machine. And so before we just run out and build a world where the machine rules, maybe we better think through, just like Pope Leo XIII did. Pope Leo XIV says, as a church, we need to think through these bedrock principles of our faith that don't change no matter what other things change. And say, what does it mean to live justly in the world today? Well, here in our parish, we're going to try to take up that challenge of Pope Leo XIV, and we're going to focus a little bit on Catholic social teaching this year in our parish. For the next 7 months, from November through May, we're going to take one of the principles of Catholic social teaching every month, and we'll look for opportunities to talk about it in homilies, prayers, faith formation, bulletins, things like that. And the 7 principles are the dignity of the human person, the importance of family, community, and participation, rights and responsibilities, the preferential option for the poor, solidarity, the rights of workers and the dignity of work, and the care of God's creation. And try to make that a little bit more fun, too. We're going to have a fun movie night every month where we watch some classic movie. We're calling it At the Movies with Pope Leo. And we're going to watch some great movie from the past that might help us think through some of these issues. And so get your popcorn out, and we'll talk more about that later. But, you know, it's important that we do this, I think, especially in a world that seems to be changing all the time, because some things don't change. And it's the teachings of Jesus, who's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And if we can think through what does it mean to be a faithful disciple in the world today, we might be able to make the world a better place. You know, I think it can be a temptation for Christians to sometimes want to hide away from the big bad world out there or pretend that changes don't happen. But Jesus always tells his disciples to do the opposite, to go out into the world and proclaim the good news of salvation, proclaim the good news of God's love for all, which is always transformative. That's what St. Paul says to Timothy today. He says, yes, remain faithful to the word that you have received from the scriptures. You've learned and believed because you know from whom you learned it. But then go out and proclaim that word. Be persistent, whether it is convenient or inconvenient. Convince, reprimand, encourage through all patience and teaching. And that's what St. Timothy and the early Christians did. They went out into the craziness of the Roman Empire at the time, and they completely transformed their world. That's what many disciples of Jesus continue to do today, like Judge Caprio, each according to their own vocation. Try to live out faithfully what it means to be a disciple of Jesus in the world today, and so begin to transform, even in a little way, the world around us, and become a little bit more like that just and merciful one who will come to judge the living and the dead.